Hey guys, welcome back to the Curly Reader. My name's Amanda, and today I have some middle grade March recommendations for you. Okay, so we have announced our prompts for middle grade March. In case you are new here and you don't even know what I'm talking about, middle grade March is a month-long readathon that I co-host during the entire month of March, where me and my fellow hosts try to encourage adults to read middle grade books. So I have an entire announcement video. I will link it down below. My co-hosts this year are Krista from Books and Jams, Katie from Life Between Words, and Jenna on Instagram. From her Instagram account is Jenna Reads and Writes. And so we are so excited for middle grade March. And so we thought that we would help give you a few recommendations for the different prompts. We have 5 different prompts, and I have 3 books to recommend from each prompt. I have read every single one of these books and stand by my recommendation of them. A few of the prompts were a little bit harder for me to come up with books that I could wholeheartedly recommend, and so but we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, I've read all 15 of these books. I love them all, would recommend. Let's just get into the prompts. The first prompt that I want to talk about is a neurodivergent main character, or a book featuring a neurodivergent character. And so I have read actually quite a few of these, and I didn't even realize it, and I have so many more on my TBR, but that is for a different video. But the ones that I want to recommend, the first one is Fish in a Tree by Linda Mullally Hunt. This is about a little girl who has dyslexia, and it has gone undiagnosed for many years. She is, I believe, 12. Most kids in middle grade books are 12. But she has a teacher that notices and wants to get her the help that she needs, and it is heartbreaking but lovely all at the same time. I absolutely love this book. Highly, highly recommend. The next one I have here is, I think, the only graphic novel of this entire bunch, and that is The Secret Garden on 81st Street. This is by Ivy Noel Weir, and this is a modern retelling of The Secret Garden, but there is anxiety rep in this, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was done so well, and this is probably one of my favorite, modern retellings of a classic that I have ever seen. So highly suggest this one, especially if you've already read The Secret Garden. There are so many little Easter egg things in here that you will absolutely just fall in love with. But even if you haven't read The Secret Garden, this is still a wonderful story that I would highly recommend, especially if you're looking for a graphic novel to put on your TBR. All right, and then the last book that I wanted to share with you had to be A Kind of Spark, or the last book for this prompt, is A Kind of Spark by Elle McNichol. This is about an autistic girl who is studying about the witch trials in school and kind of finds herself identifying with the witches and the trials that they were put through and being judged on things that they couldn't control. It is so good for just learning about the autistic community and terminology that is relevant to them, and ways that you can be more compassionate and more understanding of different things that they find, or that some of them may find difficult. I don't know. It's just so good, and I highly suggest everybody read this. This is so powerful, and I think Elle McNichol is its own voices as well. So Elle McNichol herself is neurodivergent and writes specifically about neurodivergent characters. And so she also has 2 other books out that I know of that would also fit this prompt, but I haven't read them yet. But this one I've read and absolutely loved, so highly suggest that. Okay, now let's move on to books that are award winners, but not the Newbery Award. So they've won an award that isn't the Newbery. One of the ways that you can approach this is if a Newbery winner has won other awards also, that would count because they've won an award that isn't the Newbery. But I specifically went for books that did not win the Newbery or at all. So the ones that I have here The first one is one of my like most underrated, I feel like, books that I talk about all the time, and that is Macy McMillan and the Rainbow Goddess. This won a Schneider Family Book Award, and this has the Schneider Family Book Award has to do with disability rep, and the reason that this won that award is because the main character in this book is deaf. And so it is so good. It is about a deaf girl who has a single mom who's getting remarried, and so they're moving in with her new stepdad, and she's not thrilled about it. And her mom ends up sending her to the next door neighbor's house to help the next door neighbor lady pack, because she's getting ready to move into a nursing home. And it's just about this little girl, Macy McMillan's relationship with her elderly next door neighbor, and it is so beautiful. I will probably read this again this spring because it is just like the perfect one, like in one day book. It is a book in verse. All right, the next one that I wanted to mention is Refugee by Alan Gratz. This actually won the Maud Hart Lovelace Award last year, I believe. The Maud Hart Lovelace Award is a Minnesota award, children's literature award. Refugee is a story told in 3 different parts, 3 different timelines. We follow 3 different refugees. One is Joseph. He's a Jewish boy living in 1930s Nazi Germany. One is Isabel. She's a Cuban girl in 1994 who is trying to flee Cuba. And Mahmoud is a Syrian boy in 2015 who is trying to flee Syria. And so it's so good. My daughter has now read this twice, and she really enjoyed it. It's a great one. All right. And then the last one that I wanted to mention for this prompt is Esperanza Rising, which won the Pura Belpré Award for Hispanic literature. I hope I said that right. But Esperanza Rising is a historical fiction book by Pam Munoz Ryan. It is about a little girl who is from a fairly wealthy family in Mexico, and then a tragic event happens and they have to come to the US, and they come and they are migrant workers in the US, and she goes very quickly from being very wealthy to not, and kind of gets into some of the union issues that were going on with some of the migrant workers and things like that. It's super interesting, super well done. Highly recommend. If you have not read this one yet, pick this one up. Okay, I'm gonna set these down, and then here, they can go over here. All right, next, let's talk about books that were published within the last year. This was probably my hardest one to find recommendations for because I have not read that many books that were published within the last year already, and I had very limited amounts to work with, but I did find 3, and I loved all 3 of these, and so I'm going to share them with you. The first one I have is The Lost Year. I've mentioned this a few different times on my channel. This is by Catherine Marsh, and this is a dual timeline historical fiction about the Ukrainian famine, which happened in the 1930s, I believe. Yeah, 1930s. And so we go back and forth between 1930s Ukraine, 1930s Brooklyn, maybe, somewhere in New York in the US, and then 2020 New Jersey. And so there's kids in each of those times and places that we get perspectives from, and it was so interesting because the timeline in 2020 was just there was a lot of COVID talk and a lot of his mom is a journalist and his dad is overseas, he's a foreign correspondent, and we get that, but then we also get the 1930s, post-World War I, pre-World War II, what's going on with people from the USSR that have migrated over from, or immigrated to the US to live and still have family back in the USSR. It's very interesting. Highly recommend. I really enjoyed this one. And that is The Lost Year by Catherine Marsh. And this one came out in January, I believe, of this year. Yeah, it's 2023. So I think this one came out in January, but you can get that one now. All right, and then one that I just recently read. I read this after the American Library Association's Youth Media Awards came out because this won a Newbery Honor, I believe, and it's Evilise Explains It All. This is by Andrea Beatrice Arango. And this is a book in verse about a girl who suffers from severe anxiety. So this would also, you could use this for the neurodivergent prompt as well. But this one, it has to do with her and her relationship with her family, and there's been some trauma in her past, and it explains some of that and what's going on at school, and she's having a really hard time at school and acting out and why that's happening and the explanation of it. It's just so good. I listened to this. It was like a 3-hour audiobook, and it was wonderfully done. Highly, highly recommend. So that one was fantastic. And then the other one that I read that came out within the past year, I believe this was a 2022 release. Yeah, 2022. And that is the first book in The Marvelers by Danielle Clayton. This is kind of a Harry Potter-esque book that has to do with a magical school. And so we follow, I don't even remember what her name is now, Ella Durant, and she is a conjurer. She's the first conjurer who has going to this school where all of the students have magical abilities based off of their cultural heritage. And so you have like Irish people who talk to leprechauns, and Indian people who deal with a lot of spices and just different things like that. And it's super interesting. I am very intrigued by the next book coming out, and so kind of have my eye out for that, but definitely recommend picking up this first book if you're looking for like a magical school that has a little bit of a different spin on it. So that is another one that I really suggest. Okay, next let's go with the prompt of sea or sky on the cover. So this is any book that has pictures of sea or sky on the cover. It's kind of self-explanatory. The first one I have here is My Jasper June. This is by Laurel Snyder, and this has a nice sky scene on the cover. This is about a girl who was supposed to go to camp for the summer. She ends up not going to camp, so she's home by herself, and she ends up running into this other girl. They become friends, and it's kind of their summer adventure, but you soon find out that her new friend, things aren't quite what they seem. This is a heartbreaking book, but it opens your mind to be more empathetic towards kids, because you never know what's going on in the background. And so, yeah, loved that one. I know that wasn't a lot of information to go on, but I don't want to spoil anything. All right, the next one that I have here is Caterpillar Summer. This is by Gillian McDunn, and this one has sea and sky on the cover. This is about a little girl whose brother is autistic. I think her brother's autistic, so that would count for the neurodivergent rep as well. But it's always just been like her and her mom, or her and her sibling and her mom, and then her mom has to go to, her mom's an author, she has to go to an author's conference, so they're staying with their grandparents who they never really have met before, and they're, I think, like Outer Banks, North Carolina, something along those lines. And this is all about Kat getting to be a kid for the first time, because she's always just taking care of her brother and helping her mom out by taking care of her brother. And she gets to her grandparents, and her grandparents are like, he's not your responsibility, you get to be a kid. And it's so good. It's so good. I really, really, really like this book. So that's what that one's about. And then the last one I have for this prompt, I don't have the dust jacket for this. I bought it without the dust jacket on it, but the dust jacket has a sky scene on it as well. And that is Wonderstruck by Brian Selznick. So the cover just says Wonderstruck on it, but it has this same like lightning sky cover. Brian Selznick books are known for their illustrations. So you go from like, let me find oop, there it is. You go from like text, and then on the next page you get full page illustrations. So they're huge, but only about half of this is actual text. In this book specifically, this is my favorite one that I've read from him, because in this book specifically, we're following two different timelines. One is 1970s, and the other one, I want to say it's like the 1910s or something like that. Yeah, it's 1977, and then I want to say it's 1910. I I gotta find it. 1977 and 1927. It was gonna bother me unless I figured it out. Anyway, and so the pictures are one timeline and the written words are another timeline. Both of the main characters in each timeline, one is deaf, one is hard of hearing. And so it's super, super interesting. Really, really, really love this book. And so, but that has the sky on the cover if you're looking for a book to fill that prompt. All right, the last prompt that I want to talk about is sci-fi. So sci-fi or dystopian, all the books I have here are sci-fi books. So take that for what it is. But I love middle grade sci-fi, so this was not hard to come up with some books to share with you. The first one I want to talk about is a book that is a UK release. It's a UK author, but I read it a couple years ago for middle grade March and I loved it, and that is Orion Lost by Alastair Chisholm. This is about a spaceship that is like going off, everybody's put into like cryo sleep, and then something happens and only like a select few like 12 and 13-year-olds are alive, and they have to figure out where they are in space, how to get the ship back to where it's supposed to be. They encounter things and people that are trying to stop them. They have to work together as a team. They're not necessarily the team that they would have chosen. It was so good. It was so good. I will say there are a couple of swear words in his books, so that's just a different threshold I have found with UK authors versus US authors or publishing or what. I don't know who makes that call, but I have found that UK authors, a lot of times there will be like 1 or 2 swear words in a middle grade book. But this book was so good. Highly, highly recommend. The next book I have to recommend is last year's Newbery winner, and that is The Last Cuentista by Donna Barbara Higuera. And this is a book also about a kid who was on a spaceship that got shot out into space, put into cryo sleep, and then when she wakes up, she realizes everybody else has had their memories altered except her, and she is like realizing that nobody else remembers like their history and where they came from, and that's something that's really important to her, but the people that are in charge don't want them to be remembering these things because they think if there's no memory of them, then they won't have the ability to make those same mistakes, which is not true, but you know, whatever. It's so good. And this cover, you guys, is just, I love the cover. I love the book. It totally deserved the Newbery. Highly recommend. All right. And then the last book that I wanted to recommend for sci-fi, and this one you wouldn't think is sci-fi, but it is. And that is The Strangers by Margaret Peterson Haddix. Margaret Peterson Haddix actually has a lot of sci-fi books, dystopian, like alternate universe kind of stuff. And this one follows 3 kids. I'm not going to be able to remember their names. The Greystone kids. Chess, Emma, and Finn, who their mom disappears, and then they find out on the news that 3 kids have gone missing that have their exact same names and their exact same birthdays. And they're like, wait a minute, what is happening? And so they're trying to find their mom. Things happen. It's a wild ride. It's so good. So anyway, highly suggest checking out Margaret Peterson Haddix, specifically the Greystone Secrets series, if you're looking for something that's a little less outer space and more down on earth. I don't know. Anyway, those are some recommendations to fill the different prompts for middle grade March. If you need further recommendations, feel free to reach out either in the comments down below or on my Instagram. You can always send me a message on Instagram if you're looking for a specific recommendation. I am happy to help. And yeah, I will have all of these books listed down below as well, so feel free to check them out there. That's going to do it for today. I hope that you will be joining us for middle grade March, and I hope this helped in building your TBRs. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you stick around and subscribe, and until next time, see ya.